Hi, I'm Dr. Lippy, and this is Dr. Barinholtz. And Lenny, why don't you discuss our problems with the facial nerve in surgery?
This is always an interesting challenge. All of us who do the surgery, when we lift up the tympanic membrane, we look in the middle ear, we have to be prepared for a number of surprises, or one in particular being the facial nerve, and how do we manage the facial nerve. If it's dehiscent but not overhanging, that's not an issue for us. However, if it is overhanging, this can obstruct visualization of the superstructure and the footplate. We at times may have to make a blind control hole in the footplate if we can't see it properly, and perhaps even fracture the footplate and down fracture the superstructure. Once that's done, we may be able to dissect the overhanging facial nerve superiorly and move it out of the way. This was written about several years ago in the practice, with the results being very good. The facial nerve can be indented with a prosthesis, a bucket handle Robinson prosthesis, or a modified Lippy in a revision. And this will stent the facial nerve superiorly. We've had no problems of paresis or paralysis by doing this. If one is concerned about the retraction of the facial nerve, you can use intraoperative steroids. As a parallel to this, if the promontory is also a problem, that can be drilled in order to create additional room for placement of the shaft of the prosthesis.
Well, that's good. I think that sort of defining the parameters, we both feel even though the facial nerve is dehiscent and overhanging, if you can see any of the footplate, you know, like the thinnest part of the footplate, we would go ahead. If you can't see any of the footplate, then you would probably stop and do nothing. But if you can see the slightest part of the footplate, you would go ahead. And by retracting the facial nerve with a 26 suction, you would be able to get that hole in the footplate about which you spoke. And then, almost blindly, you can remove a good deal of that footplate underneath that facial nerve that you're pushing aside as best you can. And it's interesting that when we place that, we put a vein graft down and then place the prosthesis. And it's interesting that we will very often indent that facial nerve quite a bit with the prosthesis, and yet we've never had a facial nerve paralysis. Lenny, the one thing we didn't mention when talking about the facial nerve was that although this is the way we do it, some of these will later develop a conductive loss, and they develop a conductive loss because the prosthesis is pushed out of the oval window by that facial nerve. We certainly would not ever revise this case. If it's pushed it aside once, it's going to do it again, and I think it would be a little hazardous going back into that ear a second time.